Jesse Aarons looks out the window as his father, Jack, leaves. Outside, he runs across his hometown of Lark Creek. Eventually, he returns home and takes off his tattered shoes to walk inside for breakfast. His family sits around the table, and Jesse puts his head down as his family bicker. As Jesse returns downstairs to get to the bus, he finds his sneakers are gone. His mom announces that she threw them out because they were falling apart. Jesse's annoyed, but is told that there's another pair he can use, when he looks at them and sees the girl's shoes in the corner. Jack walks in and sees the sneakers, but when Jack says to Mary that Jesse needs new ones, she pulls him aside and reminds Jack that they don't have the money. Jack accepts this fact and sides with Mary as he leaves. Before Jesse goes to do his chores, he takes a marker and tries to go over all the pink. He continues on to the greenhouse, and as he gets the irrigation system working, the bus arrives. Jesse runs through the water to get to the bus and makes it just in time. On the bus, Jesse has a sandwich thrown at him by Janice. And in class, Scott and Gary pick on Jesse, try to get him in trouble with Mrs. Myers. A new girl is brought to their class, Leslie Burke. With no available desks, Leslie's forced to sit up front at Mrs. Myers' desk. When she drops the contents of her bag, the class laughs at her. Jesse looks at Leslie while others snicker. On the playground now, Leslie encounters Janice when she wants to go out to the toilet and is refused entry unless she pays $1. Leslie tries to get in but ultimately gives up. Jesse goes to the field for a race, and while waiting for it to start, Leslie appears at the starting line. Scott immediately tries to get her to leave, but Jesse asks if Scott's afraid that Leslie will win, forcing him to back down. They start running, and for a moment, Jesse's winning before Leslie speeds past him and wins. When Leslie tries to introduce herself to him, Jesse rejects her. Back home, Jesse realizes that Leslie lives next door. Leslie and Jesse's little sister May talk before they part ways. Leslie's father, Bill Burke, asks if Leslie wants to go with him into town after saying hello. Jesse goes straight to his room where he finds that May drew in his notebook. After he yells at her, Jack walks in and sees the drawings in the book. Before we go on, like the video, smash the subscribe button and turn on that notification bell to get that full day of good luck. He asks Jesse how the race went before May tells him that the new girl beat all the boys. He tells Jesse to take out the trash dismissively. And when Jesse's doing his chores, he sees how his father acts with May Bell and is somewhat jealous of the different, more kind of treatment she receives. In class the next day, Miss Edmonds walks in and greets the class. They cheerfully greet her. She gives them instruments to play. Leslie catches Jesse staring and calls him out. The class loves Miss Edmonds' cheery nature. On the bus home while Jesse's drawing, Leslie looks over her seat and watches. He notices and quickly closes his book, but accepts the offer for gum. While at home watching TV, Jesse watches as his parents look at their perilous financial situation. When Jack catches his gaze, Jesse quickly looks away. While walking in the school halls, Scott and Gary push past Jesse, and Leslie catches his notebook before it falls. She looks at the drawings and compliments his work. He appreciates the compliment before Leslie walks into class. When in class, Mrs. Meyer praises one of the students' work until revealing it to be Leslie's. She asks Leslie to read her essay to the class, and as she reads it, Jesse watches her and sees her excitement and the imagination she writes with. He sees what she's saying like it's real. On the bus, Leslie goes to the back. As Janice walks onto the bus, May tells Jesse to save Leslie before Janice beats her up for sitting in her spot. Jesse springs to action and drags Leslie away from the back seat. As they arrive home, Leslie waves goodbye to Janice as the bus drives off. Jesse warns her that she's playing with fire, but Leslie makes it clear that she really doesn't care. She asks him if he wants to hang out with her. He doesn't answer at first, but when May chimes in and wants to do something with him, he says she can't hang out with him. May walks away upset. But Leslie says May can have her old Barbies cheering her up. Jesse and Leslie race each other and run across the fields into the forest. They talk a while they wander through the forest, and soon Leslie spots a rope that goes over the river. While Jesse tells her not to trust it, she doesn't listen. After she goes across the river and back with the rope, she convinces Jesse to do the same. They continue to go back and forth over the river on the rope. After a while, she says that she and he need a place to get away from the bullies of the world. Jesse isn't sure he understands, but Leslie goes further by saying, what if a magical kingdom existed that only they knew about? She then suggests that the rope be the only way to get to this kingdom. She goes across the river, and Jesse follows her. They find an old car. Leslie starts creating the magical kingdom, confusing Jesse. She notices something and tells him to follow her. Along the way, he's sure he can see someone in the trees. The two then stumble upon a house in the trees. He thinks she's playing a game by making this world of hers their reality, and she assures him it's not a game. She calls out to the forest saying that she and Jesse were sent to free him, and the winds blow. When Jesse says she got lucky, she says she can't hear the trees, and the wind blows stronger. Jesse watches in awe. The two spend every day together restoring the home with scraps from around the forest. They grow closer together, and one day at school, they walk past Miss Edmond, who's struggling with some boxes to the car. Leslie suggests they help, but Jesse says she's fine when Scott and Gary walk towards him. On the bus, Janice trips and blames Jesse, which causes the bus driver to kick him off. When he finally reaches home, he finds Leslie's waiting for him, covered in dried ketchup. They laugh about it before she asks to wash up in his house, so her mom doesn't see. Inside, Leslie meets Mary and Jesse's older sisters before they return to the forest. While at the treehouse, the two talk about their parents before pine cones fall from the trees. Jesse grabs them and throws them into the forest, calling them grenades. They dive for cover in the treehouse before squirrels appear in the trees. They name the evil squirrels after Scott and call them Scrogers. As the two continue pretending, they're under attack. Leslie asks Jesse if he really sees what she sees, and he tells her he does before we see the fictional beast they've created. After swatting away the Scroger, Jesse goes looking for Leslie. She tells them to climb up the tree and join her in looking out at their kingdom, Terabithia. Jesse draws until the curtain is pulled back, and his family sings happy birthday to him. He plays with his gift before May tells Jack that something broke into the greenhouse. Jesse and Jack clean up the mess, and afterwards, Jesse asks if he can help with anything else, but he's disappointed when his dad dismisses him. Back on the bus, Leslie gives Jesse an art set as a gift. May starts teasing them, saying they're in love. At school, Jesse decides to help Miss Edmond instead of worrying about what bullies say. They're annoyed when the two walk past Miss Edmond. Now in Terabithia, Jesse paints the map of their kingdom, while Leslie builds a seat. Then, while they're walking, a tree falls and nearly takes out the treehouse. Leslie says that it's a troll that pushed the tree down. They run through the forest and find the tracks. Leslie announces they're the rulers of the kingdom and that they're not afraid. A few days later, on the bus, when Leslie asks if they're going to go and slay the troll, he rejects her and tells her to get her head out of the clouds. Now at lunch, May announces she has a sweet for lunch. Jesse tries to stop her before Janice steals it. She tells Jesse that he's just upset because he didn't get one, and he tells her that she's been warned. Moments later, she runs to him, upset because Janice stole her sweet. Leslie tells Jesse that Janice needs to be taken down before starting a mini revolt with the children. Jesse gets him to back down from the fight, afraid he's going to get expelled, and Leslie says they'll get Janice back somehow. The next day, Jesse hands Leslie a note with a drawing announcing that troll hunting season has started. She runs to the forest after school and is greeted by Jesse, who's holding a dog. He gives her the dog as a gift. The two hug and share a moment before running into the forest with the dog. They imagine the dog finds the troll and are chased before Leslie's dog saves them by finding the troll's weakness, tickling. Back in the treehouse, the two devise a plan to get Janice back by faking a love letter to her from one of the popular boys. He goes through the desks in the classroom and leaves the note, even as he's almost caught. The letter tells Janice that she's pretty and to meet him after school so they can ride on the bus together. They watch as Janice stands waiting for someone who's never coming. The girls on the back of the bus talk about Janice and Willard. Janice approaches Willard, telling him she's saving him a seat, but he doesn't know what she's talking about. The whole bus watches as Janice is humiliated. May looks at Jesse and Leslie and asks if they're responsible, to which they nod their heads. When they get home, they're about to go to the forest. before Leslie sees her parents working and realizes they've finished writing. He calls out for Leslie to come and help, and she drags Jesse to her home and introduces him to her parents. While he's there, he's having fun with the Burkes and is appreciated for his artistic talents, making him wish his own parents were like the Burkes. At school on the following day, Scott and Gary knock Jesse down, and Miss Edmund sees Jesse's drawings. She tells him he's talented, before reminding him to ignore the bullies. Leslie runs up to Jesse and tells him that Janice is crying in the bathroom. He convinces her to go and talk to her. Later in the forest, she tells Jesse that Janice's dad is abusive, and the entire 8th grade knows. She goes on to tell Jesse that Janice gave her advice, and she told Janice to pretend she doesn't know what they're talking about. As the rain comes down, they return home and try to make a plan for when to return to the forest. But Jesse has chores in church, so he can't for a few days. Leslie asks if she can come to church, and he says yes. They go to church together, and Leslie catches sunlight before they go home. Back at home, Jack calls for Jesse to help him get the drill from the greenhouse. He takes the keys and grabs the drill before accidentally leaving the keys behind. Later that night, Jack wakes him up and asks him where he left the keys. Jesse looks everywhere, but he can't find them. On the bus, he learns that May took them and gave them to Leslie to build something for Terabithia. After school, they run back to Terabithia to get the keys. On the way to get the keys, Jesse and Leslie are attacked, and they fight off the Dark Master's beasts, trying to get the keys first. As they get to the treehouse, the creatures are gaining before the dragonfly soldiers come to Jesse and Leslie's rescue. He climbs the treehouse and grabs the keys. He falls out of the tree and is saved by the Janice troll. The rain starts, and the two run home. Before saying goodbye, Jesse looks at Leslie, smiling. In the morning, Jesse gets a call from Miss Edmund, who offers to take him to an art museum in the city as she's got extra tickets. Jesse jumps at the opportunity and asks his mom if it's okay. She lazily agrees, not really knowing what he's talking about. They go to the city and Jesse gets to experience a real art museum for the first time. When Jesse returns home, his parents freak out as he walks in, leaving Jesse confused. He asks why they're so panicked, and they tell him Leslie died. She went to the forest, but the rope broke, and she drowned. Jesse doesn't believe him. He runs to her house and sees the police cars. He returns to his room and looks at the drawing of Leslie in his book. The next day, Mary and Jack tell Jesse they're going to pay their respects to the Burkes. Jesse questions what they mean. He exists in a state of denial. Bill tells Jesse that he was Leslie's greatest friend, and she loved him very much. Jesse leaves, and on the way out, he sees Miss Edmund and tells her that next time, they must invite Leslie because she would like it too. At school, Scott says Jesse's the fastest kid in class now. Mrs. Myers tells Jesse to go and wait in the hall. Outside the classroom, she tells Jesse that everyone told her not to cry when her husband died. They try to help her forget and move on. She tells Jesse that Leslie was special, and if she misses her, she can't imagine what Jesse must be feeling. Jesse goes through class, dissociated. In the halls, when Scott pushes him to the ground, Janice looks at him. When Jesse's on the bus, he sees Scott with a bloody nose before Janice sits next to him and says hello. He looks back when he gets off the bus, expecting Leslie to get out, but she never does. Jesse returns to the rope and sees a fallen tree and the much shorter rope. He walks across and calls out for Leslie. He goes deeper into the forest before he hears a voice call out for him. He runs to the voice, thinking it's Leslie. But instead he finds May on the fallen tree across the river, hanging on for dear life. He goes and helps May off before telling her to go home. She tries to follow him and he pushes her down. May starts crying and runs home to her dad. Jesse returns to the treehouse, grabs his water paints, and starts emptying them into the river. He hears the sound of jingling in the wind and sees a shadow approaching. He runs and soon trips as the figure gets to him. Jack grabs Jesse and hugs him, and Jesse breaks down. He tells his father he blames himself for what happened, but Jack tells him that it's not his fault. He tells Jesse to hold on to the memory and to what Leslie gave Jack to keep her alive. Jesse tries to apologize to May Bell, but she turns away from him. He knows he has to make things right. Jesse memorializes Leslie at the river before realizing he knows how to properly pay tribute to his fallen friend. He runs to Leslie's house and then runs after a moving truck to ask Bill if he can use some lumber from his yard. He says he can, before he tells Jesse that he's meant to give him Leslie's dog, but he can't seem to give him up. Jesse tells Bill that Leslie would have wanted him to keep her dog company. Jesse returns home and begins moving lumber to the forest and working on something special. Sawing, hammering, and drilling. Finally, he paints a shield before running home to fetch May. He guides her towards the forest after some convincing. They arrive at the bridge to Terabithia. He gives May a tiara made of sticks before introducing her to the world he and Leslie created. She watches as the world comes to life in her imagination. She sees the Terabithians and the kingdom. The troll brings him his crown as the crowd cheers for the king and princess. Bridge to Terabithia was released in 2007 by Walt Disney. It starred Josh Hutcherson and Anna Sophia Robb. What would the name of your imaginary world be? Tell me with the hashtag Cinema Recap in the comments.